I never imagined I would become the kind of woman whose life unraveled because of a single moment of weakness. For most of my adult life, I believed I was steady, responsible, and predictable. I was a wife, a mother, a woman who kept her world neat and controlled. That illusion held strong until the summer my son came home from college with a friend who changed everything. My name is Linda Carter. I was 46 years old when this happened. My husband, Mark, and I had been married for over 20 years. We raised our son, Jason, in a quiet suburban neighborhood where people waved from the driveways and pretended everything was fine. From the outside, our family looked complete. Inside, however, the silence between Mark and me had grown heavier with every passing year. Mark was a good man, but we had slowly become strangers sharing a house. Conversations turned into logistics. Affection faded into routine. I told myself this was normal, that long marriages simply settled into stillness. I didn't realize how starved I was for emotional connection until someone unexpected made me feel seen again. Jason was 21 that summer, home from college and full of stories about his independence. One afternoon, he arrived with his friend Ethan. Ethan was the same age as Jason, an adult, respectful, and polite. He shook my hand, thanked me for letting him stay a few weeks, and looked me in the eye when he spoke. That shouldn't have mattered, but it did. Ethan wasn't inappropriate. He didn't flirt or cross lines. What he did was listen. When I spoke, he paid attention. When I cooked dinner, he thanked me like it meant something. He asked questions about my life, my interests, the things I enjoyed before I became Jason's mom. No one had asked me those things in years. At first, I told myself I was just enjoying the company. There was nothing wrong with conversation. Nothing wrong with feeling appreciated. But feelings don't always announce themselves honestly. They creep in quietly, disguising themselves as harmless moments. Mark worked late most nights. Jason and Ethan spent the days out together, but evenings often brought everyone back home. Over time, Jason started staying out later, leaving Ethan behind to study or relax. That's when the conversations deepened. We talked about books, about regrets, about how time seems to move faster when you're not paying attention. I should have set firmer boundaries. I should have pulled away the moment I felt my thoughts drifting toward him when he wasn't around. Instead, I let the connection grow, convincing myself it was innocent because nothing physical had happened. The night everything changed was quiet. Jason was out, Mark was away on a business trip, and the house felt unusually still. Ethan and I were in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner. The radio played softly. There was a pause in our conversation that felt heavier than silence usually does. Ethan looked at me and said something simple, something that still echoes in my mind. He said, "You deserve to be happy, you know." It wasn't a confession. It wasn't a proposal. But it broke something open inside me. I realized how long it had been since anyone cared about my happiness at all. What followed wasn't a sudden act but a series of poor decisions stacked too close together. We crossed an emotional line that night, one that should never have been approached. Even then, we stopped short of anything explicit, but the damage was already done. Once trust cracks, it doesn't matter how small the break is. The next morning, guilt settled in like a weight on my chest. I avoided Ethan. I avoided my reflection. I replayed every moment and hated myself for allowing it to happen. I wasn't confused anymore. I knew exactly what I had done wrong. Ethan left early that day. Jason came home later, unaware of the storm inside me. Mark returned a few days after that, smiling, tired, asking about his trip like nothing had changed. But everything had changed for me. I couldn't live with the silence. Weeks later, I told Mark the truth, not the details, but the reality of my emotional betrayal. His face fell in a way I will never forget. Betrayal doesn't need physical proof to be real. We went through months of painful conversations, counseling, long nights filled with tears and honesty we had avoided for years. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I believed our marriage wouldn't survive. Jason eventually noticed the tension. I never told him the specifics, and I never will. Some burdens should not be passed down. Ethan cut all contact out of respect, and I was grateful for that distance. What I learned from that chapter of my life is something I carry with me every day. Infidelity doesn't always begin with touch. Sometimes it starts with neglect, loneliness, and the lie we tell ourselves that we deserve comfort no matter the cost. I take responsibility for my choices. Loneliness explains temptation, but it never excuses betrayal. Healing required facing the parts of myself I didn't want to see, the fear of aging, the craving for validation, the avoidance of hard conversations. Today, my marriage is different. Not perfect, but honest. Mark and I communicate in ways we never did before. I no longer seek connection in silence or validation from the wrong places. If there is one reason I'd tell this story, it's not for sympathy. It's as a warning. Emotional boundaries matter. Integrity matters. And sometimes the greatest damage happens long before anyone thinks a line has been crossed. Some mistakes change you forever. The only choice after that is whether you let them define you, or teach you.